Hello, movie lovers. Welcome to Does It Hold Up? Box Office Edition. Every Tuesday, we take a look at what were the top 10 movies at the box office this last weekend, check in with how some of the movies are doing, and I also have two new charts I'm bringing to the show this week that I'm hoping you guys are going to enjoy. But first, as always, we start with the top 10 movies. In first place, surprisingly, actually, was Kung Fu Panda 4 in its second weekend. It took in $30.1 million, only a 48% drop. That's a pretty strong hold, but family-friendly movies usually hold pretty well. It's already crossed the $100 million mark with $107.8 million. Dune Part 2 stays in second place for its second week in a row, taking in another $28.5 million, a 38% drop, another strong hold for Dune Part 2, just around $205 million at the domestic box office overall. Arthur the King, new to this list, is in third place, taking in $7.6 million. We saw it. Not a great movie, but not a bad movie by any means. If you want to hear what our full thoughts on it, go ahead and check out the review on this channel, when you're done watching this one. In fourth place in its second week is Imaginary with $5.5 million, a 44% drop. So decent hold, but it didn't open all that well, so that's not unexpected. And it's taken in $19 million so far. Also in its second week, in fifth place is Cabrini with another $2.8 million, but a pretty big drop of 61%, $13 million overall. In sixth place, in its second week, technically, last week it was in 5 theaters. It added a bunch of theaters this last weekend, which technically makes it its second week, but it is new to the chart this time, is Love Lies Bleeding with just under $2.5 million. And as you can see, because of the increase in theaters this last weekend, it had an uptick of 1,549% over last weekend. Its grand total right now is $2.7 million. Bob Marley One Love still doing pretty well in its fifth week with another $2.2 million, a 44% drop. It is inching ever closer to the $100 million mark. New to the list is One Life in eighth place with $1.7 million. I expect that one to drop out next week, but it's nice to see some of these smaller movies jump in, even if just for one. In ninth place, also new to the list, is the American Society of Magical Negroes, taking in $1.3 million. Haven't had a chance to check this one out, but it is very high on my list of movies that I want to watch. And rounding out the top 10 in its fourth week is Ordinary Angels with $940,000, a 53% drop, $18 million overall, so I'm pretty sure they're happy with those numbers over at Angel Studios. 4 movies fell out of the top 10 this past weekend. After 12 weeks, Migration finally drops out, matching Wonka, who was also in the top 10 for 12 weeks before dropping out. Madam Web drops out after just 4 weeks, an abysmal failure for Sony yet again. YOLO drops out after just 1 week, and The Chosen episodes 7 and 8 after 2 weeks. Here's one of the new charts that I'm bringing to the show going forward, and it's going to be a weekend-to-weekend comparison from 2023 to 2024. How do we know how well the box office is doing? We can look at the numbers all day long, how much it's making, but are we seeing any progress towards people going back to the theaters? Are we seeing people staying away from them and the numbers are dropping consistently? Who knows? The only way to do that is to take a look weekend to weekend this year versus last year. So as you can see, we have this nice little line graph here, and it shows us every weekend comparison. So the blue line is 2023, the orange line is 2024. So if we take a look at the entire year so far, you can see that the first weekend, 2024 really wasn't that close. But the second weekend, it actually beat out last year ever so slightly. It's been down pretty much since until we hit the 9th week where it was pretty even. And then the 10th weekend, which was not this past weekend, but the weekend before, blew it out of the water. 136 million to about 117 million. And then this past weekend, well, it was pretty close. And if you look at the screen now, if you look at the chart right there, you can see that I put the top movies from each weekend as well. So in 2023, the top movie of the 11th weekend was Shazam! Fury of the Gods. This past weekend, it was Kung Fu Panda 4. It's just an interesting thing to take a look at, comparison year to year, and as you can see, we're actually staying pretty steady. We're a little bit under last year, but that's to be expected. We didn't really have a lot of big movies coming out so far this year until Dune Part 2, and last year at the same time, the beginning of the year, January, February, Avatar: The Way of Water was still in theaters and still making a bunch of money. So it's not to be expected that we were going to be a lot lower, but it is nice to see that over the last 3 weekends, we've kind of leveled out. We've either been right with 2023 or slightly over 2023. This is what we're going to look at every weekend going forward, just to see how well the box office is holding up compared to the year previous. All right, let's take a look at those top 10 movies so far of 2024. Dune Part 2 stays in first place with that $204.7 million. Kung Fu Panda jumps up 6 spots to number 2. It's now crossed that 100 million with 108. One Love drops down 1 spot. Wonka drops down 1 spot. Migration stays where it was in 5th. Mean Girls falls 2 spots. Migration finally overtakes Mean Girls, which, remember, Migration came out end of last year, and this is just the money it's made so far in 2024. So it looks like Mean Girls might have been a big disappointment for the studio. Beekeeper and Anyone But You also each drop 1 spot to 7th and 8th. Aquaman 2 and Argyle stay in 9 and 10. No new movies were added to the list, so no movies dropped off this list either. Another new chart I wanted to bring to you guys is a breakdown of what's the total gross we've had at the box office so far, and how are each genre of movie faring at the box office. I thought this was interesting because a lot of people talk about, Disney movies or Universal movies, Sony movies, but they all make different types of movies. So you can go look up the studio market share, but I was wondering, what is the market share of each genre? What movies should we expect going forward? Because if by the end of 2024, the highest grossing genre is family adventure films, well, I expect a ton more movies to be hitting theaters in that genre. So wanted to take a look at how it all breaks down. So far in 2024, the total box office gross domestically is about $1.3 billion. And if you take a look at how it's all broken down, action has taken in about 35% of that. Drama has taken in 21%. Musicals, surprisingly enough, has taken in 13.5%. Comedy, 12%. Adventure, 7.8%. Romantic comedies, just under 5%. Thriller and suspense, only 3.3%. And all the other genres that were under 3% combined right here to make up that last 2.2%. So this is a really interesting breakdown. Obviously, action is going to be at the top of this list right now because Dune Part 2 is considered an action movie, and that's skewing a lot of the numbers. Drama is really high, and that's kind of interesting. But then musical being in third place kind of threw me off. But then I had to remember, well, Mean Girls, technically a musical. Wonka, technically a musical. And those two combined are quite a bit of money for theaters. So that's kind of how it all breaks down. Thought that was kind of interesting to look at. Let me know in the comments below if you guys like these new charts I added. Are there other types of charts you would like to see? What interests you when it comes to the box office, either per weekend or for the entire year? That's it for the show this week. I'll be back again next week with another breakdown of the top 10 at the weekend's box office. Until then, be good to yourself, be kind to others, and as always, keep watching movies.